Hey everybody, Tom here with Hidden Beats, and today we were talking with the boys from the Conscience Pilate. How are you doing?
Doing great.
A bit jet lagged.
Yeah, and stuck in traffic like you were saying, so I could imagine you're just sitting there waiting on things right now.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. I'm actually waiting for my daughter to come out of her music school with the cello, and then I'll
Okay.
have to load the cello and take on some more traffic.
Mm,
And he's in Lisbon, by the way.
Lisbon.
Yes, Lisbon, Portugal. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fun. It looks like it's beautiful there. Here we're got a heat wave in Canada right now.
Yeah.
it's actually really quite strangely chilly, and it might rain today. It's not
Wow.
not the weather you'd expect this time of year.
Mm.
Hmm. And I'm in Toronto on the east side.
Yeah, so you're probably feeling a little bit of the heat wave yourself there too.
Boiling, boiling.
Yeah. Well, we're here today to talk about you guys, about the music, about the band, and kind of what you bring to the world. But for those who are new, can you give a little introduction about just who the band is and who you guys are?
Yeah, we were a 90s band, you might say. We started in 95. We were a glam rock band that started in the middle of grunge. And so not that we don't appreciate a lot of the music that was coming out of that, especially it's on my mind right now because of Steve Albini's passing. So I'm kind of actually listening to a lot of those records, but we found that there was sort of an anti theatricality, I think, sort of, or an anti concept uh, thread going on in music at the time, and so we kind of felt like what we were craving was the flash that we were enjoying from music in the 70s and some of the 80s, and we tried to put that into our show, and so we started a group that we played relatively hard rock, I suppose, in a sense, um, and kind of gussied it up with that kind of Mark Bolan, David Bowie kind of glam.
Hmm. Well, that was actually going to be kind of my next question is what were some of the influences of the sounds, kind of how you guys created what you were what you were playing with?
Pondy and I had a good time on Much Music one time, debating our '70s versus '80s influences, because of course we had both.
Hmm.
And actually, I just wanted to say, with Steve Albini passing, I mean, Surfer Rosa from the Pixies was, I think it came out in 1989, so it's technically still the '80s. But what a killer drum sound on that record! It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, some good music came out of that for sure.
Yeah. I think one thing that was happening in the 90s that we were responding to was that music had become very, very formatted and very genre, very tight to genre. Even radio stations were like, even like CFNY was becoming a very edge rock radio kind of thing. And it was like Neil mentioned that we kind of had a mix of the 70s and 80s. And I think one of the things I was very kind of pro 80s person. And what it was about the 80s that I missed was that it was the last time where music was random, like where you had a real eclectic, like on the radio when I was a kid, you turn the radio on, you hear Elton John and then Dolly Parton and then AC/DC and then Blondie all in a row,
Mhm.
like on the same station. And by the time the 90s came around, that was finished. Like you knew you're going to hear Bush X and then you're going to hear, you know, Hole or whatever, like immediately after it. And it was sort of the surprise element of radio had kind of been diminished somewhat.
Yeah, I was born in the 80s, so I just started getting into music in the 90s, and that was kind of my initial experience was kind of the same thing back to back and no randomness, like you said.
Yeah, yeah.
So you guys took a bit of a break for a bit, but you've reformed recently, and how's that been received so far?
Well, it's good. I mean, we took a break, but Neil and I, even though Neil ended up, Neil's from Portugal and then moved here when he was a kid. I think maybe Neil's busy right now. He moved here as a
No,
kid,
I'm,
and then
I'm here. I'm just waiting.
oh, you are. I'm just telling your life story, Neil.
Yeah, you go
Um,
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so he was here growing up and going to school and in university, and that's how we met. And we started our band. But then at some point after our group had wrapped up, we were still pals, but he moved to Europe. He moved to England, and he moved to. I mean, he was anyway. He ended up in Portugal, back there again. But we're still very close through the miracle of modern telecommunications. And so one day we were in Montreal having a drink, and Neil said, for the first time in 25 years, he said to me, "Let's make another record." And he got me on the right day, and I said, "Yeah, okay." And by record, he meant an LP, like a full length
I was
record.
I was I was gonna say when I
Yeah,
said record, I meant vinyl.
yeah,
So,
yeah. A gatefold
yeah.
vinyl,
Yeah.
180 grand. Yeah, I was like, yeah. So we so he went home to Portugal and I went back to Toronto. And we both kind of we had started talking about a couple song ideas, which we got going on, and we decided to put the songs out single by single rather than, because we hadn't been in a band together in a long time. So we thought, what's it going to sound like? Like, what are we going to do? So we thought, instead of putting one record out and you have one release and that's it, you use all your ammunition once, let's do it one song at a time and make singles and kind of get some interest and try and rediscover the band.
Hmm.
And so we're on single number 8 or 9 now. 10? What are we
Yeah,
on?
I've lost count. We did, we decided to also try a different just try different producers and different approaches to it. I mean, ideally, even in the modern world, I love being in the same studio with the guys and recording on tape to make the album and stuff. But it's been working quite well. I think, I record the vocals here in the studio that I usually work with in Portugal. Send it to the guys in Toronto. Edward's been working with John Dinsmore on producing the bed tracks and mixing, and I mean it's been overall a really great experience. It's perfectly doable. It's a bit of a pain when I have to fly back for every show, because especially if you don't like flying.
Yeah.
But that's all right too. It's a good reason to get on the old Silver Bird and make it across the pond.
Hmm. And you guys are coming into like the new digital era, so singles is kind of the way to go right now. It seems to be that's where everyone's like working with.
It's funny
Yeah.
because like that's kind of gone right back to the way it was in the 60s before the LP format took over. Like artists like the Beatles and the Stones used to put out singles before the album sort of came. So it's, in a way, it feels actually really natural to do it that way. We're not doing it for Danielle Ek or anybody else. We're doing it for ourselves.
Hmm. So I think your most recent single was Break Like Waves. That's one of the top ones on Spotify right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that one come together as the recent one?
One of the things we were doing was just playing. Sometimes we just talk about the news and politics and all the things that everybody talks about are depressing. And the idea of broken promises kind of came up at some point, and one of us jotted something down, and so we started playing with that term, broken promises, break like, So you start to kind of play word bingo and you start to build things together. But one of the things we were thinking about a lot right now is something that's from the 80s in a way, is the risk of nuclear war, and how a lot of the music that when we were kids, when I was 10 years old, it was really a thing, in the news. Like, we were worried that the Americans and the Russians were going to get into it. And today it seems like that is even a risk again, in a big way. And so
Hang on.
um, we weren't trying to play with that concept in a way that's disrespectful to the risk. We're just trying to articulate our fear, because now we have children, and we have another generation, and we're worried that they're going to grow up in a safe place. So we want to make sure that our communities are safe and that our governments keep their promises
Yeah.
and they don't just break.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. I have a young toddler now too, and another one on the way, and just the idea of where the world is going, or it seems to be going right now, is kind of scary sometimes.
Yeah, and you want those kids to grow up believing in things. Uh, I don't know what it'd be like for a kid to grow up today and to not even understand what it means to have a politician you can believe. I mean, when we were kids, we talked about crooked politicians, but we were almost joking when we said so. We kind of believed that they sort of were telling the truth,
Hmm.
but in a way that's evaporating. I mean, God, I'm not trying to preach, but these things do get into the songs.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
you used to. I mean, my here in Portugal. I mean, Portugal was a fascist dictatorship until 1974. So democracy is only 50 years old here, and no matter whether you were on the left side or the right side of the fence, back in this when I was a kid, you used to debate politics, but everyone spoke their truth, whether you were a communist or a right winger, whatever. you believed in that way of thinking, and you told your truth. And these days, I think obviously a lot of politicians lie because they know that by lying strategically, they can get more votes. So that kind of populism has eroded the truth that politics used to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And you really feel that in Europe. And I mean, Ukraine is a part of Europe. You know, I've got friends that work with Ukraine Music Export uh, that are no longer living in their homes. You know, and it's really, yeah. It's like Edward said. It's not a just an exercise in songwriting. And I think Bondi's written another great song. He's been writing pretty much all the new songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's not just an exercise. It really comes from a place of genuine concern and some degree of anxiety.
Yeah, and it makes sense for sure. One thing I'm curious about is coming back, reforming. You guys have been a little over a year, I think now. How do you think your music has evolved from early releases into like today's? You had that kind of break. So,
Well, one of the things I'm maybe Neil, I'll let you describe how it's evolved. But one of the characteristics of the evolution is that it's easier for us to record and to have a new idea and move on to the next song. And back when we were in the band the first time, we saved our pennies and went and recorded. And that was kind of like you could maybe record once a year. Like you couldn't practice, couldn't go back and keep doing it. But now we're able to use our recording process as an instrument itself, kind of more like Brian Eno talked about. So that's a big evolution, is being able to say like, hey, you know what? I thought the hi-hat was really loud on the last song. Let's change it for the next one. And it's easy to make those changes. And we go like, okay, I'm just making that up. But like
yeah.
you could have an idea and go like, let's do one with bongos, and try something.
Mm-hmm.
And Neil's very, very pro. Neil, I kind of write a lot and kind of organize the recordings. And Neil is kind of our record label. Like he's our management. And so he's kind of the suit.
I always used to do that even back in the day. I mean, we sort of wanted to learn the ropes of the business as well, and so that's always been a part of it. And that's what I do here in Lisbon. You know, I have a record label, and I'm very involved in the local music industry and the local scene, and so that part just comes naturally to me. But as far as like, how it's evolved, I think, I mean, I still like it the old way. I like recording on tape, and I'm sort of I'm an old school fellow that way. So it's a bit strange for me. I'm gonna switch to the car audio and brave the traffic again. So if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things, as far you asked, like, how has our sound evolved? I think back in the day, because we were sort of a rehearsal space band, we got together like 3 times a week and we jammed for hours at a time. And it was like all very high volume. We were young and it was like, oh, like, and I think our sound maybe now is a little more detailed, a little bit more, we try to make it hard rock, but it's got some more elements to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that makes sense because you also grow with your music too. You probably had some different aspirations or different, influences that were like influencing just how music itself was made back then. And now things, you're older, you're thought a little bit more about different things and changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, gosh, I mean, at the time, like Kurt Cobain had only been gone for 2 years or something like that at the time. And I don't think I'd ever heard the Flaming Lips yet at that point, when, there's things that were so giant in our life that hadn't even happened yet, and so we're responding to a completely different world now.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
I'm curious what's something you guys have learned about yourselves throughout the music process, just as a growth thing or a personal aspect.
Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Edward and I we're a couple of sort of creative human beings that have done different things in music, and Edward's worked in film and photography, and I've done different types of music projects. in several different genres. And I think I'm actually I'm actually going to give you a quote from our guitarist Stacy Stray. He said, when we were younger, and part of the reason why the band split up was that we were in a rush. We were always like driving over the speed limit.
Mhm.
And I think the learning, and there's a great sentence that Stacy wrote or said, or he's like, these days we don't have to drive over the speed limit. We can just do what we do with a certain amount of serenity to it. We want to do it because we love making music, and then just let things come as they will or won't. It doesn't necessarily make a difference in that we're doing it for ourselves first, and we're not in a rush to get anywhere. It's the process is the thing. It's not about the product. And that applies both to recording, which I love, and also to playing live, which I also love. Even if it's maybe a little harder to memorize lyrics in my old age. But I thought I'm joking about that sort of, but it's like I totally just enjoy making music both in the studio and live. So that certainly has not changed. I don't think it ever will change.
Mm-hmm. That actually
Yeah.
was the next question, was what is the favorite part of the process for each of you?
Yeah, I think both aspects uh they sort
Playing
of
live.
triggered.
Playing live,
You
yeah.
like playing live better? Yeah.
Oh, it's so
I like
great.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if we're in a good analog studio, I probably like recording better. But playing
Mm.
live is more of a rush, so it's a different side of the brain that is activated, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, music being as crazy as it is, you guys have been around for a little bit in the industry. What do you do to stay grounded outside of that, to keep yourself on a good level playing field mentally and physically?
Ooh, I don't know if I'm in a good, healthy mental. Um, Pondy, I'll let you take this one.
Well, I'm a big believer in like creative cross training, like where you like I'm a filmmaker, I'm a cinematographer, and I make commercials, and I make short films, shoot a lot of comedy stuff, and I make music. And I find that even when I'm jumping from role to role and medium to medium, I read a Frank Zappa autobiography one time 25 years ago, and he was talking about like that instinct to compose exists with a person. It can exist with a person all the time, whether you're cooking or you're like building something, and I think like David Lynch kind of embodies that too, where it's really the same instinct you're bringing to your project no matter what it is at all times, whether it's a film or it's dinner or if it's a song. And I find that switching to a different, like if you switch to broadcast or whatever, like you exercise that muscle in a different way, and it's very satisfying.
That makes sense, actually. I think, especially just the idea you saying about whatever you're working on or dinner. Like, so I do a lot of photo video stuff myself outside of this. And whenever I go cook dinner for my wife, I'm trying to make that perfect piece of dinner and something that I know she'll enjoy, because she's currently pregnant. So I know everything's picky with her, and I have to exercise all those little aspects of making sure it's something that she'll actually eat. So I
Yeah.
can
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, it's gonna be baby boy due in October.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Mhm.
That's the best month. I'm October 15th myself.
So my wife is her birthday is October 1st. The baby's due October 19th. And then my birthday is November 6th, and our daughter, who's going to be 2, is November 7th.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, so right there, all in one spot, kind of thing.
House
Autumnal.
full of house full of Libras.
Yeah.
Scorpios for the November ones.
Oh,
Ah,
right. Okay, that's Scorpio already. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like the 23rd is the switch of in October to the Scorpio side.
So
right.
so earlier today as I was driving here, I was listening to the new Bowie release that has a bunch of the Ziggy Stardust demos.
Hmm.
And there are some incredible, because Edward's been sending me these new songs in demo format or in several different types. And speaking of childbirth and the creative process of a song, there's these amazing snapshots on the digital platforms now of Bowie actually writing Lady Stardust and Starman and stuff. And that was one of the songs we covered on our 1996 release, Living in a Movie Scene, was Bowie's Lady Stardust. So if you get a chance, check that out. It's really just great snapshots of that creative process.
Yeah, I'll definitely. I'll make a note of that actually right now, just to do that. Speaking of like sending new songs and stuff, what's something on your guys' go-to playlist that people wouldn't expect you're listening to?
I don't know, Neil.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah.
That they wouldn't expect me to listen to. I mean, I love a lot of I love ABBA, for example.
Okay.
And you wouldn't expect a rock guy to like ABBA, and even a lot of the Swedish rock and roll friends that I have, it's always like for them a bit of a guilty pleasure. But
Mhm.
the production quality, the production values that went into making those records are like phenomenal. And I like good sounding records. I love production, so ABBA is definitely probably something you wouldn't expect, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, ABBA's a great one. I have ABBA on my playlist right now still, so nothing wrong with a
There you go.
good song
No,
from ABBA.
fantastic. Yeah.
And you, Pondy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess my guiltiest pleasure is I'm a big Duran Duran fan, I suppose, really.
Oh, come on. That's a cool thing. That's not a guilty
What
pleasure.
is
That's
now?
Yeah, there was a point where I guess it wasn't exactly a cool thing.
Yeah.
okay. Okay. I'll see your Duran Duran and I'll raise you Wham and George Michael, which I totally always loved and
Yeah.
was definitely not cool in the rock and roll circles.
No.
Yeah,
But you and I
yeah.
always talked about we've talked about covering Playing for Time.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, cover we would love to do. It's the first track off Listen Without Prejudice. Because I remember when Listen Without Prejudice came out, I was at university and my roommate had it for some reason on cassette. I think his mom gave it to him or something. I said, like, why on earth do you have that record? And he said, you should listen to it. So I was in Ottawa. It was cold. It was like winter. And
Mhm.
I went for a walk across campus and I got my Walkman out and I put that cassette in and I walked and listened to it. And I came back and went, that record is just fucking great. Like
Mhm.
it was like I love it when there's someone that you underestimate or you don't, or you're not interested in, you hear something and it's just fantastic, you know? So it's nice to be surprised. I would love it if Celine Dion put an album out I liked. I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be cool if it did.
I mean, yeah, that's it. Once you get surprised by someone, it makes it really really fun, like diving through their catalog after that.
Yeah. Well, what it did was it burned off my hangups about who George Michael is and what he was doing, and I just began to realize like, yeah, he just has been doing really good work. It wasn't what I needed to hear at the time, but there's nothing wrong with it.
Mhm. Yeah, I have Wham on my playlist too. I have a pretty eclectic taste. If it's a good song, I don't care where it's from. It's gonna go on my playlist.
So the thing about the '90s when the band started up is that all of those bands that we just talked about, it was like a swear word. Like they were out. Like you wouldn't hear them even ironically anywhere. It was just considered garbage, which is funny. It was almost like it wasn't enough that people didn't like it; they didn't want anyone else to like it either.
Yeah,
And it was there's a lot of like '80s hate going on at the time, and I didn't understand what the purpose was.
that's like Nickelback now. Everyone loves to hate Nickelback for some reason.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
I think they're one of the great rock bands right now, and they put on probably one of the best live shows of recent times for sure.
yeah, well,
That's another difference with when you were asking earlier what's different nowadays is I don't really hate anything anymore. Like I used to be really opinionated and like, I'd get into it with I don't know, but I didn't like Pearl Jam at the time. I was like, I don't,
Mhm.
and so I'd get into it with friends who were into grunge and stuff, and I just don't do that anymore. Life's too short. Like let's just enjoy whatever it is we enjoy, and as much diversity as possible,
Mhm.
and appreciate things for what they are. It's not. I don't feel like it's things don't have to be black or white or for or against or when they ask the desert island type questions about like what record would you take and stuff. I'm like, I, you know, the quantity of records I would take has increased manyfold, so it's much harder to pick, you know.
Yeah, those questions can be really interesting sometimes, or just a dead stop because there's too much to choose from, really.
It's
Yeah.
funny. We were talking about Steve Albini earlier. I've actually kind of watched a bunch of long interviews with him, and I'm gonna say that he still seems like as interesting and cool as he is or whatever. He did seem like a bit of a hater. Like there were
Oh yeah.
things he
Yeah.
hated, you know, and
Oh
I
yeah.
and I found that like I find that anytime someone is so convinced of their rightness that they think something is just total garbage, I think there's something suspect in that situation.
Mhm. Yeah,
I say this with all my love because I just found out that my middle son is autistic, but I think Steve Albini had that sort of, you know, probably on the scale of autism, and
Right.
you know that's what also made him brilliant, I think.
Mhm.
But maybe some of that comes across, and then you kind of, as you grow older, you kind of make it your shtick as well. It's part of your
Yeah.
image, you know. I saw him at South by Southwest, I think maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, having a chat with Kim Deal. I think it was Kim Deal. Was it
Yep.
Kim Gordon?
Kim Deal.
No, it was Kim Deal. Yeah, but at South by it might have been Kim Gordon. Anyway, it's and he totally, it very much felt like it was part of his persona, you know, in a very endearing way. You know, it wasn't like he didn't come across as a hater necessarily, but he certainly was opinionated.
Yeah, I suppose you kind of build that into just who you are as you get older and as you know grow into it, really.
I think I've tried to sort of grow it out of me, but it doesn't matter which way you go. It's still a struggle, and every day's a day.
Mhm.
Is that why we're covering a Fleetwood Mac song now?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's Fleetwood Mac is one of those bands that if you'd suggested we cover back in 95, 96, I probably would have said no. Um, and I didn't really know Tusk as an album as well, you know, as some of their other 80s stuff, which I actually quite liked, again, because they're great songs. And I think what's hard with covering some of these classics, I feel like it's difficult to give them maybe the right approach of personality versus respecting the original, you know, like just so it's a kind of whereas I don't even think we thought about it when we covered Lady Stardust, you know. It's like, oh, we love Bowie, let's do it, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, now you're trying to give it a little bit more of the maybe some respect, and then also trying to do pay homage to it, but not not ruin it. Like it's harder to actually put all that together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially not ruin it.
Yeah. So we've got a few more minutes left here. Zoom will kick us off, and I have a couple fun questions I think you guys will enjoy. The first one, going back to the interview stuff, what's one question you think should be asked more in an interview that's not asked enough?
Andy?
Uh, I think I often see interviews with artists go by where they don't ask the artist, what are you listening to right now? Because I really always want to know what people are listening to.
Mhm.
And it's funny, it seems so obvious, but it doesn't get asked. But that's not a very interesting answer.
I mean, I've had all kinds of answers to that question, and it's curious because everyone has a different perspective of what they might want to hear in an interview or what you just don't get asked enough yourself. Like there's all kinds of sides to it.
Okay, here's the
Right.
question. Here's the question. Steve Albini answered this question. They said, like, what's the most important record to you in your life? And he said, the first Ramones album. And he said, the first time I ever heard it, I thought it was a joke because it was like these badly played songs played by this band that were sounded bad, and the songs sounded like a joke to me. And he said, my friends and I, we sat there and laughed at it. And then I ordered the cassette, and he got it, and he said I played it to death. And he said it changed my entire life. He said that record, it taught me what punk could be, what it meant to be inclusive, and it meant for anyone to be able to make music and be allowed. So it's interesting to me to hear an artist say what record changed their life when they heard it.
That's a good one. I like that one actually. I'm actually writing
What
it.
would you answer if that was asked of you, Edward?
Uh, okay. Well, this is gonna sound like a fake answer, but I swear to God, it's true. I think Neil, you'll know that it's true. One of the first albums I bought, which was by accident because I didn't know anything, when David Bowie was big in the early '80s, when Modern Love and everything was out, they had these bargain bins at record stores, and they would be selling records for like $1.99 or whatever. And
Mhm.
RCA had a label called Nice Price. And I bought two David Bowie cassettes out of the bin for $1.99 each. One was Heroes, and the other one was Ziggy Stardust. And they came out in the early '70s. To me, it was like they came out like before World War II. They were so old. But I went home and I put on Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, and 5 years came on, and then Soul Love. And I can't say that I sat there and loved it right away because his voice sounded thin and reedy. It didn't sound like rock music. I couldn't even understand what genre I was listening to. And I was thinking, did I just buy something stupid? It was one of the ways that I first kind of went, it's like exploded genres for me. And I kept listening to it because I didn't own any records. So I just listened to those,
Mhm.
and it really, really grew on me. And I'm going to say that I did it. It was without any influences because no one told me that it was a good album. So, but I remember listening and thinking, is this good or not? I couldn't really understand, and I liked being puzzled by it. And it changed the way I listen to music.
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
think at the end of the day, that's really what you know. uh, Edward and I are very close. I think everybody has their differences over the years, but I think um, Ziggy Stardust is the same for me. That was the first record. So the first vinyl record I ever bought in my life was a Stones compilation called Rolled Gold, but that doesn't count because that's a compilation. But
Yeah.
Sympathy for the Devil was a it really changed the way my brain was wired. But when I moved to Canada at the age of 12, at Fairview Mall, the first vinyl record I bought was Ziggy Stardust as well. Um, and I don't remember why I chose it. It was I think it's like you were saying, Bowie must have been on Much Music at the time with some other like I think Much Music. I know what it was. Much Music broadcast the Glass Spider tour,
Oh,
and I enjoyed watching the Glass Spider tour on Much Music. So I went out and bought the first Bowie record that I found, which was Ziggy Stardust, Nice Price on vinyl, or
yeah.
Best Buy or something like this. Um, and that record also changed my life for sure. Like I mean, and I actually again, it's why I brought it up today. Like the fact that now on digital, like on Spotify, we're able to hear the demos and the way that he went about putting those songs together and the Arnold Corns versions and all of that. It's
Mhm.
just amazing. It's just like going back to today's age and the kids these I mean, the fact that kids these days don't have to go out to a record shop in a mall and choose one record. They
Yeah,
can listen to everything. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. It's just like how many rabbit holes do you go down? It's just amazing.
I've been down
Yeah.
more than a few myself. So
Yeah. Well, my friend's daughter, who's in high school right now, she's in grade 9, and she's just getting into Bikini Kill. And so she can access everything they've ever done online instantly. And she's like, this is my band. And I was thinking, like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
my niece
yeah.
just found Elvis, and
Yeah.
Oh, I love Elvis. Yeah.
she kind of went, "Have you heard about this before?" She's 16, grade 10 or whatever, and I'm like, "Yeah, I've heard Elvis before."
Yeah.
So she's like mind blowing. She's usually into like the deathcore grunge metal rock stuff, and then all of a sudden Elvis came up, and it was like a whole new world for her right there.
That's
And
cool.
with Elvis, it's the same thing. I mean, I used to watch Elvis on tour on Much Music, the '72 documentary film, and now all of the live concerts that were recorded for that film are also available officially, not as bootlegs, but with good sound on
Mhm.
Spotify. And listening to those live shows, start to finish, several tour dates because he toured a lot.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's amazing hearing those live shows, and they sound great. Like I mean, just again, the production, the performance, all of the aspects. I'm a huge Elvis fan.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, speaking of live shows, you guys have a homecoming show coming up at the Horseshoe in Toronto. What can people expect with the big show that's coming up?
They can expect Neil to be here. He's flying over for that.
There we
So
go.
come up the weekend, we'll do some rehearsing, and we're calling it our long weekend recovery show. So it'll be very relaxing. We'll be gentle, and
I mean, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
we're going on at 10 o'clock at the Horseshoe, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're playing with our friends High Flyer.
Nice.
I mean, Horseshoe has always been one of my favorite places to play. We opened for the Manic Street Preachers back there in '96, and I've played that venue several times. It's just great to go back there. So I'm just expecting a like hugely joyful,
Like a nostalgic.
energetic, and yeah, but like energetic performance that's going to be even better than the Dakota Tavern, which we played a couple months ago, and it was packed show. And I think the Horseshoe is going to be even better. I'm super pumped and looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, time's about to cut us off here, but I think definitely I had fun picking your brains, and I think we could probably do this again and keep talking for hours at this point. Stories are always fun.
For sure.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, we're gonna make sure we link everything in the description, and like I said, I'd love to do this again at some point.
Awesome.
Let's
do
that.
it. Be great.
All right, we'll
Cheers.
keep in touch.
Good day.
Bye
Bye.
now.
Take care.